No one ever believes a story until the blood hits the floor. But that night, the people who claimed they loved me the most stood in my kitchen and showed my children exactly what monsters look like. I remember the moment everything shifted, right when my father's polished Italian shoe drove into my ribs so hard that the world snapped white. I wasn't terrified. I wasn't confused. I wasn't even broken. Something inside me simply woke up. It was the moment I realized the people I had spent a lifetime protecting were ready to destroy me without hesitation, and they had dragged my children into the line of fire. Ava's screams cut through the house like a warning siren, her tiny body curled into the corner behind the kitchen table. Mason stood frozen in the doorway, still clutching the empty toy box in both hands, his eyes wide with a kind of silence children should never learn. Dad kicked me again, harder, as if proving a point he'd been waiting years to deliver. "You're nothing," he growled, and for the first time, I heard the truth, not about me, but about him. Mom stood near the refrigerator, arms crossed, as if my pain inconvenienced her cardigan. "How dare you waste money on that kid?" The same woman who had spent years pretending every bruise was my own fault said it like she was scolding me for burning dinner, not watching my daughter brace herself against trauma she'd never forget. Sophia leaned back on the counter, her glossy nails catching the light, her face twisted in that familiar smirk. "Should have given the money to me. Like you were supposed to." My college fund had disappeared into her salon equipment last month. I had the bank statements to prove it. Her voice carried a kind of satisfaction, as if watching me bleed somehow confirmed she'd always been the chosen one. Uncle Frank stood in the doorway with the beer I had poured him 20 minutes earlier, nodding like a judge delivering a sentence. "Finally," he muttered, "someone teaching her about family first." Family first! That was always the excuse. The shield. The weapon. Dad grabbed a fistful of my hair and slammed my face against the floor. My nose cracked, warm blood spilling onto the tile in heavy droplets. When my cheek hit the linoleum, the floor felt cool. Shockingly cool, almost comforting, against the fire blazing through my skull. But even then, even while the room spun, even with Ava's screams turning sharp and animalistic, my thoughts sharpened to a terrifying clarity. He marched toward Ava next. She tried to disappear into the corner, but there was nowhere to hide. Mason had placed his brand new action figure on a chair to keep it safe. Dad ripped open the packaging like it offended him personally, walked to the trash can and shoved it deep into the garbage. Mason made a sound I will never forget. Half gasp, half heartbreak, all betrayal. Something inside me straightened. I pushed myself up slowly, my fingers leaving bloody streaks across the tile. My ribs screamed with every breath, my blouse soaked through with crimson, but I stood. Not because I was strong, because I was done. Mom expected apologies, Dad expected silence, Sophia expected obedience, Frank expected fear. Instead, I grinned. Their faces shifted the second they saw it. The smile, the blood on my teeth, the steadiness in my voice that wasn't supposed to exist after a beating like that. "What did you say?" I asked Dad softly, tasting copper at the back of my throat. Sophia scoffed. "Oh, look, she grew a backbone." I pulled my phone from my pocket. My hand was steady, shockingly steady. I turned the screen toward them, the glowing feed from the tiny camera mounted above the cabinets clear as day. "See that?" I said. "It's been recording since you walked in. Every kick, every word, every threat." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Mom's voice cracked into a high-pitched panic. "That's illegal! You can't record people without... It's my house. One-party consent, and I gave mine." Dad's face drained from red to gray. Uncle Frank lowered his beer like it suddenly weighed 20 pounds. Sophia's smirk dissolved into the first real fear I'd ever seen on her face. "You're going to leave," I said, my voice cold, calm, controlled. "And you're never coming back." Dad tried to laugh. "You don't have a lawyer?" "I do," I replied, "and she gets this video in the morning." Mom took a shaky step backward. Dad sputtered something about family loyalty. Sophia cursed under her breath. Frank muttered something about misunderstandings. And then they walked out, one by one, past the blood on my floor, past the children they had terrorized, past the version of me they thought would stay silent forever. When the door shut, I locked it, then slid down to the floor, phone in hand, blood still dripping, my children throwing themselves into my arms and shaking. I whispered into Ava's hair, "It's over. Nobody is ever going to hurt Mommy in front of you again." But I was wrong. It wasn't over. It was only the beginning. At the hospital, the fluorescent lights made everything look colder, harsher, too bright for the kind of pain that walked through those doors. The nurse handed me a clipboard, but my fingers shook just enough that she silently took it back and filled in most of it herself while Ava clung to my side and Mason sat stiff and quiet in the chair, staring at the dried blood on my blouse. The doctor who examined me was a tired woman in her 50s with eyes that had seen this 1,000 times. She pressed her fingers along my ribs, watched my face for the slightest flinch, ordered x-rays, and cleaned the cuts on my face without asking any unnecessary questions. 2 fractured ribs, a broken nose, a concussion. The words dropped out of her mouth clinically, but the weight of them sank deep. She handed me a small stack of papers. Women's shelters, domestic violence resources, hotlines, a social worker's card. "You don't have to stay in this," she said quietly. "It was my father," I answered, exhausted. "Not my husband." She didn't even blink. "Doesn't matter who hits you. The help is the same." She was right. Violence with a father's face was still violence. Ryan arrived before the pain meds fully settled in. He wasn't supposed to be back from his work trip until Wednesday, but the second he walked into the exam room and saw my face, every muscle in his body snapped to attention. His skin went pale, jaw clenched so hard I heard his teeth grind. "Who?" One word. Low, dangerous. "My family." I said, "Oh, but I've already started handling it." I told him everything. The camera, the video, the threats, the years of small cuts and quiet thefts, the way my father had shown up at my office weeks earlier to go through my purse like it was his personal wallet, how I'd finally gone to see a lawyer because something in me had known this wasn't going to stop. It was going to escalate. Ryan didn't interrupt, didn't try to talk me out of anything. He just listened, eyes dark and steady, absorbing every detail like it was evidence for a case of his own. When I finished, he nodded once. "What do you need from me?" "Take the kids home," I said. "I have calls to make." Her name was Christine Walsh. Family law, restraining orders, quiet reputation for being lethal in court. A coworker who escaped an abusive marriage had slid me her number months ago, just in case. At the time, I thought I was overreacting, that maybe all families were like this, and I just needed to toughen up. Now, lying on a hospital bed with my ribs wrapped and my face throbbing, I knew better. I'd already texted Christine from Ryan's phone because the doctor told me I should avoid screens. She picked up on the second ring despite the late hour. "Tell me everything," she said. "No small talk, no hesitation." I described the attack, the video, the way my father had kicked me while I was down, the way my mother had encouraged him, the way my sister had mocked me in front of my children. I told her about years of financial abuse, my disappeared college fund, the forced loans, the money siphoned from accounts I never got back. I explained how long this had been building. She listened without a single interruption, only breaking in to ask pointed, precise questions. Was the video clear? Were their faces visible? Was the audio clean? Yes. Yes. Yes, I'd invested in good equipment. If I was going to be paranoid, I was going to be thorough. "Send me the video tonight," she said. "I'll file for an emergency restraining order first thing Tuesday morning. We'll also open the door to criminal charges if you want to walk through it." "I want consequences," I answered. "Real ones." "Then they're going to get them," she said. "With footage that strong, the DA will almost certainly prosecute. Your father could face actual jail time. Your mother helped create a dangerous environment in front of your kids. That won't look good either." Legal words blurred together in my foggy brain. prosecution, restraining orders, charges, filings, but a single line burned clear. For once in their lives, there would be repercussions they couldn't bully, guilt, or manipulate their way out of. Ryan took the kids home. I went back with him a few hours later, stiff and wrapped and aching but standing. Inside, the house still smelled like dinner and spilled beer and fear. Outside, the night was quiet in the way that always follows explosions. Mason looked at me with a gravity no 8-year-old should carry. "Why did Grandpa hurt you?" he asked, voice small and broken. How do you explain generational cruelty to a child? How do you translate decades of being the family scapegoat into language that doesn't scar? "Because I didn't do what he wanted," I said honestly. "And because he thinks that gives him the right to hurt people. But he's wrong, and I'm making sure it never happens again." Ava's little fingers brushed my cheek, smearing dried blood. "You're bleeding a lot," she whispered. "I know, baby," I said, "and we're going to be okay. Nobody's ever going to hurt Mommy in front of you again, and nobody's ever going to hurt you." The next morning it began. Voicemails started hitting my phone like bullets. 17 by noon on Tuesday. Dad's enraged voice demanding I call back immediately. Mom sobbing about how I was tearing the family apart. Sophia screaming insults so vicious I didn't bother letting the messages finish. Uncle Frank calling me dramatic, saying Dad had just got carried away, insisting family doesn't press charges on family. I deleted most of them after a few seconds. Christine had warned me they'd launch a guilt and intimidation campaign. She called them flying monkeys, people sent to do the abuser's work for them. She was right. By 10 a.m., the emergency restraining orders were filed. By midday, the judge had signed them. My father, my mother, and Sophia were legally barred from coming near me or my children. The police report was filed at the same time. Officer Jennifer Medina came to my house to take my statement. She watched the video in silence on her laptop at my kitchen table, the same tile where my blood had stained the floor. When Dad's boot connected with my ribs for the second time, a flicker of something hot and sharp crossed her face before she smoothed it away. "Your father's going to be arrested this afternoon," she said when the video ended. "Your mother likely won't see criminal charges unless the DA decides to pursue child endangerment, but she's covered under the restraining order. Your sister, too. She didn't hit you, but her threats and behavior contributed to the hostile environment. We'll make sure she's included." For the first time in my life, someone in a position of authority looked at my family's behavior and didn't excuse it, didn't blame me. Didn't tell me to forgive and move on. By evening, it was official. Dad was in handcuffs, charged, processed. A mugshot of the respectable businessman, church volunteer, and beloved community figure appeared quietly on a local news site not long after. The headline was simple. The comments were not. People who knew him as the charming father of the golden daughter, the dedicated small business owner, the man who grilled at neighborhood barbecues and shook the pastor's hand every Sunday, flooded the page with disbelief. This must be a mistake. He'd never do that. He's such a good man. No one ever really knows what happens behind closed doors, not until someone finally opens them and refuses to shut them again. Dad sat in county jail when the judge set his bail, $50,000. Not pocket change. His assets were tied up in inventory and equipment. Cash flow didn't care about assault charges. Mom hesitated on the home equity loan. Uncle Frank grudgingly put up money toward the bond only after a week passed and it became clear Dad wasn't getting out otherwise. 7 days in a cell. 7 days to sit with the consequences of one afternoon in my kitchen. People later said he came out looking older, smaller, like something in him had collapsed. Good, I thought when I heard it. Pain, finally landing where it belonged. And while he scrambled in the dark to salvage what he could of his life, I sat at a lawyer's polished conference table with a folder full of receipts, statements, and screenshots, watching a man in a sharp suit flip through years of theft and call it by its real name: financial abuse. And I wasn't done yet. The civil case moved like a blade, silent, sharp, and precise. Marcus, my civil attorney, laid every receipt, every stolen dollar, every coerced loan, every text message demanding money across the table like evidence collected from a crime scene. Because that's what it was, a slow, methodical robbery carried out under the disguise of family. He counted it all, over $50,000 siphoned from me in 12 years. My stolen college fund, my grandmother's opal jewelry, pawned by Sophia for a quick thousand. Years of forced financial dependence disguised as helping the family. And layered over it all, the emotional abuse, the scapegoating, the insults, the subtle threats, the family-first manipulation used to keep me compliant. Sophia's deposition was brutal, but not for me. Marcus questioned her so calmly she never realized she was stepping into traps until the jaws snapped shut. Her answers contradicted each other, contradicted the records, contradicted basic logic. She tried to justify. She tried to reframe. She tried to lie, but paperwork doesn't lie, screenshots don't lie, bank statements don't lie. And the video? The video told the truth in a way words never could. Mom tried to cry her way through her deposition, claiming she didn't remember, claiming she had always tried to keep the peace. But the hospital records showed she never visited. The text messages showed she always took Sophia's side. The decades showed she had never been a peacekeeper, only an enabler. Even Uncle Frank tried to dodge. He showed up drunk, belligerent, muttering about keeping family business quiet. But in 2 hours, he admitted more than he realized. Past incidents, patterns of violence, the belief that I needed discipline. Marcus just smiled and thanked him for his honesty. Finally, the day came when the settlement negotiations began. Dad was still sitting behind bars, being processed for prison transfer. His lawyer made a pathetic first offer, $20,000. Marcus laughed. The back and forth continued, each offer more insulting than the last, but they were running out of money, and options, and dignity. They needed the NDA, they needed silence, they needed their reputation back, something they'd spent years polishing at church and neighborhood events. But I refused to sell my silence. Not again, not ever. In the end, they broke first. The final settlement landed at $75,000, paid within 30 days. No NDA, no gag order, no pretending everything was fine. They liquidated everything. Dad's business was sold off for scraps. Mom took out a home equity loan. Sophia maxed her credit cards. Uncle Frank quietly backed away, unwilling to bleed for them the way he expected me to bleed. When the money hit my account, I didn't feel triumph. I felt something quieter, something cleaner, closure. I paid off our mortgage, medical bills, therapy bills for myself and the kids. Then I opened new college funds for Ava and Mason, the kind nobody could ever steal from them, and with what remained, I re-enrolled in school, reclaiming the future that had been taken from me a decade earlier. My old home was sold. Sophia's salon went under in less than 6 months. Mom moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. Dad, a convicted felon, spent his days stacking boxes in a warehouse, and the world finally saw them for who they were. Years passed. The air in my home changed. Lighter, safer, filled with laughter that no longer sounded forced. Ava began sleeping through the night. Mason stopped flinching at sudden noises. Ryan and I renewed our vows in a small ceremony surrounded only by people who loved us. Truly loved us. One quiet evening, Mason sat beside me on the couch, holding the new action figure I'd bought him, the same one my father had thrown away. He ran his fingers over it gently, thoughtfully. "Mom," he whispered, "are we safe now?" I pulled him close, feeling his small heartbeat against my side. "Yes," I said, "we're safe." Later, by the fireplace, I opened the letter Sophia sent, half apology, half accusation, dripping in self-pity. She asked for forgiveness, closure, a chance to pretend she'd never played a role. I struck a match, fed the flame, watched the paper curl into ashes. Ryan handed me a glass of wine. "Do you feel better?" I nodded slowly. "I'm getting there." And I was, because some people insist family deserves unconditional forgiveness. That blood outweighs pain. That betrayal is just what families do. But those people have never been kicked in the ribs by their father while their children screamed. They've never had their bank accounts drained, their boundaries bulldozed, their childhood stolen piece by piece. They've never been taught that love and cruelty come in the same package. I didn't become the villain in my family's story. I became the ending they never saw coming. And if choosing myself, choosing my children, makes me the villain in their narrative, then I will wear that crown with pride. Because it's better to be the villain in someone else's story than the victim in your own.